Cheek, cheek.
When you're separate is hard, right? It's hard. And I think the best thing for me was I was okay with change. I was okay with shit changing.
Cry and cry, and she had like this crazy mommy. She would not let go of me at all.
And I think as I've matured, I understood that. I understood that everything has its own nature.
Namaste, amigos. This is Vanessa and Aesha, two wildly passionate women coming to you from opposite sides of the world, Australia and Mexico. This podcast is for you, about you, all of us, all women from all walks of lives, sharing our stories, our truths, our struggles as we uplift, transform, break boundaries, and grow. Today's topic is about how relationships change with your friends, with your ex, and how you build your new family once you have divorced or separated. What happens to your friendships and your all around circle of people that you are constantly surrounding yourself with while married? Are they the same relationships post marriage or post separation? This is an interesting topic. I think it goes one extreme to another. How was you okay there?
Yeah, all good.
How was your relationship? Let's start with the families. How was your relationship with your extended family once you separated?
That's quite interesting. I wanted to sort of start off the bat by saying that things do change. You know, relationships definitely do change. Dynamics do change as much as we think they won't. They do because it's nature, right? And certain situations arise where emotions can be aroused and then you end up feeling a certain way and then that creates a behavior and then eventually there are different dynamics and different rules at play, and so things do change. And you know trying to hold on to something that worked while you were married and then um keep that sort of momentum going when you're separate is hard,
Mm.
right? It's hard. And I think the best thing for me was I was okay with change. I was okay with shit changing. And so, and it's how everybody, I think, also relates to the breakup and what they individually require. Because I'm a person that sort of needs my own time. I need it. I need to process what happened. I need to go through the ups and downs, feel right through it, and then I'm good to go, right? Someone else can be completely opposite. So I think, initially for me, I like that separate time, even whether it's the ex partner or the extended family. I really do, you know, separate. I do take that. And I think on a family level, I think even if you have the picture perfect, crystal amazing relationship with your in-laws or your ex or whatever, I think dynamics do change, I think um and I think that's natural, and so I'm good with change with that. What about you?
Yeah, I think things do change. I think there's a difference with when kids are young. When I separated, my daughter was one, so she didn't speak,
Mm,
and I had to be the one to give him the news because I had moved away. So I had to give him the updates on how his daughter was doing,
true.
because you can only put the phone up so much. There is no real, when you're a toddler, You're not looking at the phone and saying, "Hey, I had a really nice day at school and I played with my friends." I mean, my daughter's 6 now and she's, quick on the phone. It's not like you who have teenagers and can actually, have a full-on conversation. So I think that I've always I've always come from the perspective that there's no real reason to have that animosity. There's no reason why we can't get along because we have children in common. And
Mm, but do you think that comes after a while or straight off the bat?
no, I think I tried for it to be straight off the bat. But I think that's because somewhere deep inside, I wanted my family back.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
I
Hmm.
wanted, I wanted, I wanted to soften up so that maybe he could soften up and somehow we could find each other somewhere along the way,
Wow.
you know?
Wow.
Um, and, uh, and so we would talk a lot and, and it gave me a lot of hope
Mm.
because we would speak a lot, like every day, couple times a day. And sometimes we'd speak about Chloe and then we wouldn't. And so I'd have all this hope.
This was after you broke up, right?
It was after I broke up, yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
And, and we had a distance that separated us. And then when I really started to kind of look at what was going on, um, it was we were having great chemistry over the phone, but when it came to actions, I would see him once a year
Mm.
or twice a year. So action, what was being shown and what was actually being played out were two different stories.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and then I would have all my hopes up when he'd come visit. And
Dude, but don't you think that's a trap though? Don't you
it,
think
it's
so
it's
many
such it's such a
women
mental fucking
yo-yo?
entanglement.
Yeah. That's crazy. I think when I hear that, I just think shit, like that, and a lot of people don't do it my way, but I disconnect straight away. My relationship to that relationship has changed. My relationship to that person has changed. I do not jump straight into it because I'm like, let me process myself first, right? Because I don't want to go back and forward, because I don't want to keep myself on that leash, right? So man, I go through it and I go through it alone and I really, really make sure that I understand it's done. Right.
Yeah.
So the relationship with myself comes first. Because I was like, that whole confusion, you know what? Like I've known you and you've told me a little bit. You still didn't turn it ugly. I know so many women in that, and that story goes on for so long that then they are like, what is he doing? Do you know who he likes now? Who is he with? That story continues from that because of the hope.
Yeah. No, of course. And I had friends that were like, if he wanted to be there, he'd be there. He'd be
Yeah.
there. He'd
Yeah.
be there. He'd be showing you more than words that he wants to be there right next to you. Or he would have you have that conversation of, hey, you need to come home. And there was just that hope.
Yeah.
It's that hope of, or he'd throw he'd throw a bone at me, like,
Mm.
and my heart would explode with emotion. And I was like, oh, I'm so in love
Yeah.
with my family and my family has hope. And because I was in such an illusion of, I didn't want my family to break. I didn't want to not have that three-part, my mom, my dad, and my daughter image. It was so heartbreaking. And And I kept it going and going until the point that I really noticed that he didn't want it, you know? And so how long do you make yourself suffer?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why I do it so opposite to so many people. I just detach, just to not emotionally detach, just to pull away to give myself space to really go through the process, you know? And don't forget, because most of the times the women or the mums are left with children, right? So we have to take into account too, like there's two individuals. You've got the husband and you've got the wife in the traditional setup. The wife normally ends up with the children, right? Especially initially. That process of her going through the separation and the man's very different.
Very
He
different.
has
Very
complete
different.
freedom.
Yeah.
He has a complete different way of how he can take it and handle it and go through the process. You do not, I did not, right? I could not leave my kids. I could not just say, hey, I'm out. And so my process had to make sure I was okay. So were they, right? So very, very different thing. And it changes your relationship to your kids as well. It really does, because I then had to become the fill-in masculine or the fill-in father, because I had the mum side, but now I'm like, okay, now I also have to do this and make sure, I'm not just coming to them from a place of just a mum, but I've also got to sort of feel other needs for them, and then I felt I had to play the dual role of like mum and dad and all that stuff. So I noticed that it doesn't just affect like your exes and your relationship, it also streams down to your kids and how you start relating to them. A lot of parents, I've noticed, they parent their, like if they are separated or divorced, they then start overcompensating their parenting because they feel sorry for the kid. So that changes, right? They're like, oh my God, this kid is now, a kid from divorced home. I've got to now give them
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
extra. And that's a relationship change there.
Yeah.
Or some people are just so broken that they lose a part of their mum or dad, where they're just like, there's a loss and there's that grief, and they don't have that life again, from their parents. So relationships do change within that breakup and stuff. And I think it's about being aware and then sort of not going back to what it was, because you can't. Your environment has changed now, situation has changed now, but reestablishing a relationship now that works, that's empowering for both.
I do have to say one thing, because my daughter was so young, and she was 13 months when I got here, and till about 3,
Mm.
she would cry and cry, and she had like this crazy mommy, mommy, mommy. She would not let go of me at all.
Well,
And
that's changed, Vanessa.
that is completely. But it's very funny because I cried a lot, a lot, a lot the first year,
Wow.
and I never cried in front of her. I would wait for her. I would pick her up, and then I would eventually get home, have her in bed, and then I'd cry when she was asleep
Wow. For a year?
for about a year,
Wow.
straight. And then
Wow.
to really to do it really well, I would go outside of the bedroom and put like Whitney Houston on to cry even better, like it was so dramatic. Now that I think of it, it was like, oh my God, what was I doing? But it was bad. Like that was like how I increased my state, right? Of feeling so sorry for myself.
Oh,
And and um and the reflection of
it's
my
energy,
daughter
baby. Energy.
was that. And so she would cry and cry and cry and cry. And I wanted to just like, I'd look at her and I'd be like, stop crying, like, stop crying, please. But
Yeah.
she was just my reflection,
Yeah.
like really just doing it. And she looked how I felt inside. And I remember my mom would come and visit and I'd hand her over and she'd keep on crying and she'd be like, mommy, mommy. And it's so funny. The minute I started to shift emotionally,
Wow.
Chloe stopped crying.
Yeah.
So, for you listeners out there, there's definitely one thing about having young kids, they're all energy. And
They're
so
all
if
right.
you are looking at your kids and you're not understanding why they're acting the way they are, you have to look at how you're feeling inside because
Mm,
they are probably just that reflection. And for
absolutely.
me, I was like, oh my God, look, she's doing so much better. Oh yeah, so am I.
Wow, that's incredible and very interesting. And you know, I don't know what it was about me because I think Aaliyah was about 11 and Ria was about 6 when when I went through my first divorce. And yeah, you're right. You know, when I was stable and sturdy, so were they. You know, and I think that's
And
a really good
six
point.
is young. I mean, six is old enough but young enough to
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, but honestly speaking, when I look back and I see my kids, you know, it's so funny. So someone had messaged on one of my socials like hats off to you and everything, but so sad. And I just thought, what are we sad about? You know? And they're like, oh, like it's just sad the situation. And I was like, oh, I just really thought about that. I said, wow, like from her perspective, my life must be sad now, right? And then she was sad for Zarava, my son. And and because I've grown in this, and like I said, it's all about growth within the relationship. Because I've grown in it, I said, isn't it funny how perspective really gives you judgment, right? Of a situation. Because I can sit here and give her my perspective. And it's the fact that, you know, a child can grow up in a home with a mum and dad, but the mum be abused every single day. Does that mean just because that boy gets to see his dad every day that it's a healthy
Relationship,
situation,
right? Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So, you know, as I look and I grow, I understood. I started to detach more from the circumstances of the relationship and focus more on the relationship itself, right? Because circumstances are not always going to be in your hand, right? Living situations, life is going to happen. And I think where we have power is the relationship we have to that, right? And to ourselves in that moment. And that has been a massive thing. So even a lot of people feel like the breakdown of friendships when divorce and separation happens, and you know they'll feel miserable because I thought she was my friend and I thought this was that. But what they're not understanding is maybe that friendship did only happen because you also had that marriage,
Right.
right? So maybe that was feeding that, and they were feeding the marriage, and that's how that relationship was. And I think as I've matured, I understood that. I understood that everything has its own nature, right? So if that marriage had its own nature and it created a certain energy, you'd attract through that marriage also those kind of people and those kind of friendships and that kind of nature, right? When that breaks apart, naturally, some people dissolve, right? Some people leave. And it's really important not to let those breakdowns of relationships affect you because they have also run its course like the marriage has. And you know, so many women judge themselves and think they weren't a good something, or I didn't have a great friendship with them, and that whole thing becomes so ugly because they're judging themselves on something that it's a circumstance.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the whole relationship thing is all about. What is your relationship to yourself? How are you relating to yourself in relation to what's happening? And the second one for me was, how am I relating to my children? How am I showing up for my kids? Other than that, it's a bonus if they get a great side of me. Like, I'm not going to, you know, work or do extra to make everybody else happy. But my initial relationship matter was between me. How was I showing up mentally, physically, energetically? Right. Then how am I showing up for my kids? Other than that, that was coming after these two were sorted. I did not care if you were sad because I didn't talk to you, or, a lot of the times it's like, oh, you should behave like this with your ex because, this is the right thing to do. No, no, no. The right thing to do is to get me stable, to get me centered, to get me in a place where I'm coming from love now. And then my kids get that. Everything else comes after that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I was very much on that too.
Mm,
It was really just kind of focusing on me and Chloe.
yeah. Did you find friendships fell apart?
No, I honestly I did not. Because we had moved away from the hub of where I had all my friendships.
Hmm.
It was it was not, and I had made no real friendships where I had moved to,
Okay.
except for very few, and they weren't they weren't relationships that we had in common. I think that was, it seemed
Yes.
like my marriage fell apart because all of a sudden I had moved and he was doing him and I was all alone.
Yeah.
So I felt more like abandoned than anything else. So I didn't lose my friends, and my friends have been coming to Mexico ever since we broke up, and it's been like, life goes on, really.
Yep. Yep. I think similar experience too. Most of my so-called friendships that sort of fell apart was through him anyway. That was through his work, through his relations, through his sort of whole little world. But the ones that I had before that, no, they're solid as. So and that's okay, man. And that's what I always feel like that's okay. But a lot of people struggle with that. But I've had a very similar experience with you where, yeah, our friendships that were on a what about, okay, wait, what about the any couples that were like you and your ex, and as a couple you hung out? Was there any awkward situation where they felt like they had to pick a side or anything like that? Because I've heard that sometimes.
I think we had friends. And I think all of our friends were concerned about us as a relationship,
Okay.
but a lot of these friends were my friends that had become very close with him, that tried to reach out, but he didn't want any part. He had like cut those ties, and he was like, "Nope, I want nothing to do with anyone that is related to her." And I think some people were hurt from that. Like I have a girlfriend that was very close to him, and it was like, dude, I'm not 15 to pick a side, like we can get along all in different places. But, I think you're right. It's people act differently when a relationship is going through it. And some people pick sides, some people don't. Um, I think it is what it is. For example, I haven't spoken to my mother-in-law um, since I broke
I'm sure
up.
you're not the only one.
That's for sure, right? But I think even that relationship with as a grandmother, she hasn't reached out to her granddaughter, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's just different perspectives, and who knows what
Yeah, yeah,
people go.
and no one is wrong and right. Yeah, no one is wrong and right. I
No
I
one
I
is
really
wrong,
wanna
no
put that
one
out
is
there.
right. It's just different ways and different personalities, and you can say, well, I don't think it should be this way, but that's your own belief, right? And and you can only do you at the end of the day. So you keep it moving, and I keep it moving as healthy as I possibly can for the
Absolutely,
benefit
man.
of my daughter, and you know,
And I love that. I love what you said is that you do your best for the health and wealth and stability of your daughter, and I think honestly, if you have that intention, it's all you need. People do process pain differently. People do process things differently, and that should be allowed.
yeah,
And I think if we have the intention of like doing what's right for us and then our kids as well, you can't go wrong. You just
yeah,
can't. Trying to do things right is what fucks it up.
yeah,
Trying, right?
yeah,
Because your internal state is not matching the behavior, and then there's conflict within you and you're miserable. And that's what screws a lot of people up. And I think they rush that process of let's just everybody have a great relationship and let's just, make everything sweet. And dude, just go through the process. Let it do its thing. Let it happen, and like actually sit with what you feel. And I think more people are doing that these days. Not everything is book smart done. Like, hey, psychologist says, you must do it this way and do it. No, you know what? Have a completely different setup, backup, understanding, conditioning, belief. So is that person. We're doing our best.
yeah. I agree. Good talk. Good talk. For you viewers out there, we would love to hear how you feel that your relationships have changed with your ex, with your in laws, with yourself, and with your kids. Please let us know and put a comment in there, and we'd love to hear back from you so that we can continue growing and really bringing all these comments out so we can really build this community on you.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So till next time, ciao and lots of love.